Hello, this is Bill Zoller with the lifestyle-interventions.com website, and today we want to talk a bit about the issue of our culture as it relates to the addictive disorders, addiction. We would invite you to take a look at our website, lifestyle-interventions.com, under the disease prevention heading, and page down and you'll find a 2016 article on addictions. So one of the reasons that we're talking about this today is because the attitudes in our country about drug use appear to be getting more and more permissive. So we have good reason to be concerned about. And what this is what I call relativism. Sometimes they call it toxic relativism, which means that the boundaries around the whole issue of what you do and what you don't do are really slipping in an anti-moral direction. So we have a problem with common sense. We have a problem with adults assuming responsibility in terms of their direction that we need to be providing for our youth. Public officials are involved in this, as is the judiciary, and as well as many of our parents. Tobacco addiction costs us about 5 million lives every year. Smoking harms nearly every organ system in the body. Cigarette smoke contains over 4,000 chemicals, including 43 of which are known cancer-causing compounds. Tobacco may be as addictive as cocaine, alcohol, and heroin. When we intervene in lifestyle medicine, when we intervene with people to try to get them off of tobacco, we find that counseling and medication in combination are more powerful and effective than either one taken individually. A brief vignette. Some years ago, I was the clinical director of a 22-bed inpatient substance abuse unit, and we treated a male nurse who was not from our medical center, but from another place. And he was a smoker and had a serious alcohol problem. So the staff engaged in a discussion about what should we do with this man's tobacco use, because even then, some years ago, we knew that tobacco was extremely harmful. And unfortunately, what happened with this individual is he got away from alcohol, was able to do that, but did not stop smoking, and died 3 years later from a tobacco-induced cancer. So what I learned from this is it's very important in the treatment business for the staff to be of one mind and to have a evidence-based position for everything that they do. Stimulants. They include amphetamines, methamphetamine, cocaine, caffeine, crystal meth, and so on. They result in hypertension, having craving for the drug, increased tolerance for the drug, and withdrawal symptoms. Opioids, a very popular topic. Every day, 116 people die from opioid overdose. This includes substances such as morphine, heroin, fentanyl, and oxycodone. It has developed into a public health crisis. We need to be asking ourselves as parents, as members of our community, and so on, how can we contribute to the whole effort to decrease the demand for drugs, because there's no indication that the supply is going to lessen. So we need to intervene with people and get them to to not start in the first place, or if they are, to really commit themselves to viable treatment. A few words about cannabis. In our culture, it is now outdated to oppose the legalization of marijuana. And I would ask, how does the use of marijuana improve our culture, improve our health, our physical health and our mental health? And so I think that this is another example of relativism, toxic relativism, where the boundaries have really slipped and people have not stood up to the task of drawing reasonable boundaries and understanding the risks involved here. Where is our moral compass and our common sense and our adult leadership and our political leadership and our faith-based leadership in this regard? So we do understand that there are therapeutic uses for cannabis. It is effective for some pain syndromes and also for some of the cancer treatments and in minimizing the side effects. So in combination with tobacco, cannabis use and the health risks are very prominent. So cannabis is a gateway drug for tobacco, and tobacco is a gateway drug for cannabis. Also vaping enters into this. I'll mention something about that shortly. So cannabis use can compromise brain function, and some of that brain function is not reversible. About 9% of those who experiment with marijuana will become addicted, and the number is much higher if they start use during the teen years, and especially if they use daily early on. And so those people are very prone to addiction. There are very high levels of addictive compounds in cannabis that can lead to auditory and visual hallucinations. I have a list of over 24 negative health effects from cannabis. Don't have time to review those now. But getting back to vaping, this habituation and addiction to e-cigarettes has caught on like a wildfire in our culture. There is a contagion effect involved here where a young person, or perhaps not a young person, would see those in their social group using and want to try it themselves, and do try it and get off on a slippery slope and get addicted. So also in our media, we see a lot of ambivalence about where the line ought to be drawn on this whole issue of tobacco and vaping and other drugs. There are some men's magazines that instruct us on micro-dosing, how to use small quantities of a whole variety of drugs. I'm really ashamed of these people. They don't know where to draw the line. Most adults who vape do this to get away from tobacco. But when we look at solid research studies of these adults, what we find is that they are not quitting smoking. What they're doing is continuing both smoking and vaping. A couple of words about CBD, which you've probably heard of. It has a lot of positive therapeutic uses, but be aware of this. CBD can be derived from both industrial hemp plants and from the female marijuana plant. Hemp typically contains a much stronger concentration of CBD and less than 0.3% of THC. The marijuana plant has a minimum of 20% of THC, so be clear about what you're purchasing when you purchase it. As of April 2019, CBD from marijuana remains a Schedule I drug because it may have high potential for habituation and addiction. A couple of words about alcohol. It is a monster. For many people, not all people, but for many people, it is a monster, and they pay a huge price for continuing to drink. A 2017 study indicates that 1 in 8 Americans is a heavy drinker. Adverse health consequences from alcohol include several cancers, the risk of stroke, high blood pressure, cirrhosis of the liver, pancreatitis, and weakening of the immune system, which is a very serious issue because it sets us up for a whole slew of medical difficulties. Food addiction. Food can be addictive, and it has to do with the levels and types of sugar, salt, and fat in the processed foods, which they have demonstrated now light up the pleasure pathways in the brain and can facilitate an addictive process. Technology addiction, very interesting. These same pleasure centers in the brain light up for many people when they get a hit of gratification from a new email, or from a Facebook like, or from an Instagram heart. Very interesting stuff about an unanticipated result of technology. Polydrug addiction. It is not unusual for folks to be using tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol in combination, and then also perhaps experimenting with some other drugs also, maybe some amphetamines or opiates or whatever. A couple of remarks before we wrap this up. So this drug issue is a supply and a demand problem. I see no evidence that the supply is going to decrease. We must get a handle on this in terms of providing a market for the drugs. We need to orient people toward non-use, and we need to work toward a national consensus on this issue of what the boundaries are. We need to reestablish clear, concise boundaries. When I was raised years ago, the boundaries were crystal clear, and it's not that we didn't experiment with alcohol and so on, but it was clear to our parents that as young people we had no business doing that, and so on and so forth. We must engage families, the school system, the media, select government agencies, and church-based organizations in this whole effort to make clear what the boundaries are regarding addictive and habituating drugs. We need to get the point across that trying drugs is not something we do. It is a losing game. Because when we use these addictive drugs, we support the drug dealers, and we support the whole financial apparatus that propels this vicious cycle. So that's about all that I'm going to say about addiction tonight. I hope that you can glean something from this that you can share with others, and that it may make a difference in their lives. We thank you very much for being with us tonight.